Let me tell you about a family I want you to picture. They did everything right. They saved their down payment, they got their pre approval, they found a home in their price range, and they made an offer. Then they got outbid. So they tried again, outbid again, three times, four times, and eventually they gave up. They went back to renting, not because they lacked discipline, not because they lacked desire, because the system did not have enough homes for them to buy. That story is not rare. That story is playing out in every market every single day, and the people living that story look like us. I'm Tamara Singleton, TSing Builder, and I have spent 25 years in this industry watching brilliant, hardworking people get locked out of home ownership by a system that never built enough homes, never fixed its appraisal bias, never made manufactured housing a dignified asset as it deserved to be. It never made a path from renting to home ownership as clear as it needed to be. Well, Congress just responded. The Renewing Opportunity in the American Dream to Housing Act, the Road to Housing Act, became law this July 2026. This is a bipartisan bill. It cleared the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs unanimously, the first bipartisan housing markup in over a decade. And it contains 40 sections across 8 titles that touch nearly every corner of the housing system. Now, most of what you're reading online about this bill stays so far above ground level, it means nothing to the person trying to buy the first home, sell their current one, or even keep the one they already have. This episode brings it all the way down to street level. We're talking about what this law actually contains, what it means for buyers, sellers, and homeowners, where it delivers, and where the work remains. Welcome to episode 4 of Generational Wealth Building Podcast. Let's get into it. Let's start with what ROAD actually stands for, because the name tells you the mission. ROAD, Renewing Opportunity in the American Dream to Housing. The bill addresses the housing affordability crisis that Congress identified as driven by 4 compounding factors: the rising housing prices, elevated mortgage rates, increasing property insurance costs, and housing supply constraints in markets across the country. The law organizes its solutions across 8 titles. Title 1, Improving Financial Literacy and Housing Counseling Access. Title 2, Building More in America, 13 sections targeting housing supply, zoning reform, and permitting. Title 3, Manufactured Housing for America, 4 sections modernizing manufactured and modular housing. Title 4, Accessing the American Dream, Home Ownership Access, Small Mortgage Lending, and Appraisal Reform. Title 5, Program Reform, Community Development, Block Grants, Home Investment Partnerships, Rural Housing, and Homelessness Program. Title 6, Veterans in Housing, VA Loan Awareness, and Veterans Homelessness Assistance. Title 7, Oversight and Accountability, Congressional Federal Officials Oversight and Appraisal Modernization. Title 8, Coordination, Studies, and Reporting, Interagency Cooperation in Self-Sufficiency Programs. 40 sections, 8 titles, and every single one of them carries implications for how Americans buy, sell, rent, and build wealth through real estate. Let's break down what matters most to you. Title 2 carries 13 sections and sit at the heart of this legislation because you cannot solve a housing shortage without building more homes. Here's what Title 2 actually does: zoning and land use reform. The Housing Supply Frameworks Act within Title II incentivizes local governments to change restrictive zoning land and use policies. Federal dollars now attached to local governments willing to open up their zoning for more housing production. This matters enormously in markets like San Antonio, where land sits available, but zoning restrictions slow what builders can put on it. Streamline environmental review. The Unlocking Housing Supply Through Streamlined Modernized Reviews Act reduces federal environmental review requirements that have historically delayed construction timelines by months or years. Faster review means faster groundbreaking, transit oriented development. The Build More Housing Near Transit Act pushes more housing construction near public transportation corridors, a direct strategy for expanding affordable access in urban and suburban markets. Vacant structure conversion. The Reside Act, revitalizing empty structures into desirable environments, authorizes programs to convert vacant commercial and office buildings into residential housing. In a post pandemic market where office vacancy sits at a record high, this provision unlocks existing structures as housing supply. Community Reinvestment Act modifications. The law modifies the CRA to align lending incentives with housing supply goals, pushing banks to invest in communities where housing gaps run deepest. Innovation Fund and grant programs. New competitive grant programs authorize funding for housing construction and rehabilitation, giving municipalities and developers direct federal support to build. For buyers, every one of these provisions works towards one outcome: more homes available in your price range in your market over the next 24 to 48 months. The supply relief takes time to materialize. Your strategy for today runs alongside what this law builds for tomorrow. I need to spend some real time on Title III because this one hits directly in my role and it carries enormous implications for wealth building in communities like ours. Title III contains four sections dedicated entirely to manufactured and modular housing, and this matters because manufactured homes on owned land represent one of the most powerful and underutilized pathways to home ownership available to working families today. Here's what Title III does: amends the statutory definition of a manufactured home. The current definition has limited financing options and stigmatized manufactured homes in ways that kept buyers and lenders away. Updating the definition opens doors to more competitive financing products and broader market acceptance. Property Improvement and Manufactured Housing Loan Modernization Act. This section adjusts homes loan insurance programs to better serve manufactured home buyers, expanding access to FHA-backed financing for this segment of the market. Price Act Competitive Grant Program. The Price Act authorizes a competitive grant program specifically supporting manufactured home communities. These grants fund activities that improve the infrastructure, stability, and resident protections within manufactured home communities. Modular Housing Production Act directs a study of modular building codes to push towards standardization, which reduces production costs and accelerates delivery timelines. Here's why this matters. Personally, to my work, I carry a license to sell manufactured homes through Homes to Go. I operate in the Oaks at Waterwood subdivision in Elmendorf, 72 half-acre lots where families build home ownership on their own land with a manufactured home. That is exactly the model this legislation supports. When the federal government modernizes manufactured housing definitions, improves loan insurance programs, and funds community support, this validates the model and expands the buyer pool. More buyers qualifies, close deals, more buyers build equity on their own land. That is generational wealth. And this law just gave it federal foundation. Title 4 carries 5 sections under the heading Assessing the American Dream, and 2 of them deserve our full attention. Small dollar mortgage reform. 2 sections addresses barriers to small dollar mortgage lending and reduce the points and fees on small dollar loans. Here's why that matters. Lenders have historically avoided small mortgages loans under $150,000 because the profit margin does not justify the origination cost. That reality has shut first generation buyers out of the affordable markets where homes exist, but financing does not. This law targets that gap directly. The Appraisal Industry Improvement Act. This one carries weight that goes beyond dollars. Discriminatory appraisals have cost Black homeowners billions in suppressed equity. Study after study documents homes in Black neighborhoods appraised at lower values than identical homes in white neighborhoods, not because of market data, but because the bias embedded in the appraisal process. The Appraisal Industry Improvement Act directs changes to appraisal requirements, and critically, Title VII adds a provision giving homeowners recourse against unsupported appraisal reports. For Black homeowners specifically, this provision represents a federal acknowledgement that appraisal discrimination is real, documented, and harmful, and that the system owes those homeowners a mechanism for challenge and accountability. For Black households who carry a home ownership rate of roughly 44% compared to 73% of white households, according to the Census of Bureau data, every dollar of suppressed equity represents compounded generational loss. This law takes a step forward to address that. Helping More Families Save Act expands an existing savings plan for tenants receiving rental assistance, building a bridge from subsidized renting towards eventual home ownerships. Renters with savings accumulate a pathway. That pathway leads to home ownership. Home ownership builds wealth. Wealth passes forward. That is the road. 3 more title groupings deserve your attention before we talk about what this law leaves on the table. Title 5, Program Reform. The law reauthorizes and reforms the Home Investment Partnership Program, Community Development Block Grants for disaster recovery, Rural Housing Service Programs, and the Continuum of Care, the Homelessness Program. These programs fund affordable housing construction, disaster recovery housing, and rural community development. Reauthorization keeps the funding pipeline alive. Reform pushes these programs to perform more efficiently and reach more families. For San Antonio and South Texas specifically, the Rural Housing Service Reform Act carries direct relevance. Communities in our region access rural housing programs that fund affordable housing construction and rehabilitation. So, stronger rural housing investment means more options for buyers in markets outside the urban core, including communities surrounding San Antonio, such as Elmendorf, where the Oaks at Waterwood sits. So, Title VI is for veterans in housing. The VA Home Loan Awareness Act and the Veterans Affairs Loan Informed Disclosure Act add VA loan disclosure requirements to conventional and FHA loan applications. When a veteran applies for any home loan, they now receive clear information about their VA benefit options. Too many veterans leave VA loan benefits on the table simply because no one told them clearly what they qualify for. This provision closes that gap. Title VII, Oversight and Accountability. The law requires regular testimony from federal housing officials before Congress, increases FHA reporting requirements, and establishes a new inspector general for housing programs. Accountability at the federal level means programs actually deliver their intended outcomes. And when they don't, Congress has the reporting structure to intervene. Now, let's talk about the 3 factors hitting affordability hardest right now. And what this law does and does not address: mortgage rates. The Road to Housing Act does not control interest rates. The Federal Reserve holds that level. Rates remain elevated, and they represent the single biggest monthly affordability barrier for the buyers today. The law's supply provisions work toward easing price pressure over time, and lower prices with elevated rates still produce a better affordability equation, and then higher prices with elevated rates. Work with your lender now to understand exactly what rate and price combination your budget supports. So, the next one is homeowners insurance. The law acknowledges rising property insurance costs as a contributing factor to the affordability crisis in its findings. Direct insurance market reform sits at the state level. In Texas, homeowners carry some of the highest premium increases in the nation. The law does not restructure insurance markets. Shop your coverage at every renewal. Ask your insurance broker about bundling deductibles adjustments and withheld coverage options specifically. Rising premiums directly, what is costing you monthly. And sellers, it factors into their pricing. So the conversation must be had. Now let's talk about property taxes. Property tax systems is at the state and local level. This federal law does not restructure Texas property tax obligations. File your homestead exemption. Apply for every senior disability and veteran exemption available to your household. Protest your appraisal value annually through your county appraisal district. That single action saves hundreds to thousands of dollars per year for homeowners who pursue it consistently. So here's what I want you to get out of this episode. The Road to Housing Act represents real, meaningful bipartisan progress. 40 sections, 8 titles: manufactured housing reform, appraisal accountability, zoning incentives, small mortgage access, veterans protections, program reauthorizations. This law touches the housing system at nearly every level. And hear me clearly: supply side reform takes time to reach your front door. Rates stay elevated today, prices stay at record levels today, and the communities that carry the steepest climb towards home ownership still face real structural barriers that this law addresses partially and must address more fully over time. So here's your assignment. If you want to buy, know your credit score, your budget, your down payment position in your financing options, including FHA, VA if you serve, and manufactured home loan programs that this law just strengthened. If you want to sell, price strategically, present professionally, and market aggressively to the widest qualified buyer pool available. If you already own, know your equity, file your exemptions available, shop your insurance, and protest your appraisal every single year. And if you want someone to walk that road with you, reach out to me. I am Tamara Singleton, TSing Wealth Builder, serving buyers, sellers, and wealth builders across San Antonio and the surrounding communities. I specialize in the exact intersection where this law lives: manufactured homes, new construction, project management, and generational wealth strategy. Subscribe to this channel, share this episode with someone who needs information, and I will see you next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Until then, you attract what you are, so be great. Let's go, San Antonio.